Hey everybody, Derek here. D&J's Epic Quest. Always feels weird when it's just me out of the two of us, but today I'm here with Mike Roberti, and we're going to talk about his book, The Traitors We Are. So I just finished this a couple weeks ago, and you were gracious enough to take some time to spend with me here talking about your book.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited. So yeah, let's get to it, man. I've been waiting for this. I felt bad that I had to cancel the last time we scheduled it.
No worries, things happen. Um, Just one little housekeeping thing before we get started here. I don't know if you've listened to any of our other stuff, if you've read Malazan, or if you listened to our stuff with HC, but the beginning of every episode, we got a little shout out here for Silverstones, and I'll run through our patrons quick. But before we get started today, I'd like to take a moment to thank and recognize Silverstone's books. Check out their website, silverstonesbooks.com, or if you're in the Nebraska area, check out their storefront. He's got a large selection of sci-fi, fantasy, horror books, lots of other stuff too. A lot of signed copies. He carries a large number of indie authors, so help us help them in supporting indie published authors. And he's been gracious enough to give us a promo code for 10% off your next order. That is DJ Quest at the checkout on Cavan's site. So if you want to pick up a book, you can pick up Mike's books there. You can save a couple bucks with our code. And our patrons in order of subscription, I've got Jan the Picker, Luciana Etrigan, Ryan the Topological, Damien the Rock of Faces, Nate Fiddle Me This, Shield Anvil Dylan, Calvin He Who Witnessed, Livia the Malazan Potato, and Aaron Mott Irregular. I know Jan will listen to this. I don't know if any the rest of them will. So thanks for bearing with me with a little bit of beginning of episode stuff. So yeah, how's it going, man? How's your day been?
It's been pretty good. I had a slower day than normal, so this worked out really, really good. I only had to drive two driver's ed cars, and nobody crashed, so that's always a positive.
Oh, have you been in like an accident behind the wheel stuff?
Not exactly, but like I've had some close calls, and today was a pretty easy day. But I mean, you just kind of never know what's going to happen with like that sort of thing. So it's kind of like I always make sure to hug my kids and give them like a little kiss before I go, or you know.
I got you. Yeah, my child just turned 15 in May and is through driver's training now, and we've
Mm,
been doing a little bit behind the wheel stuff. Hasn't had a instructor led behind the wheel yet. I'm not sure when that's coming, but
mm.
yeah, she does pretty good. I think she's nervous with her mom. She doesn't like driving with her mom, but more comfortable with me. Likes driving my wife's smaller car than mine,
Mm-hmm.
but so adulting.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things. I think it's easier to drive when it's not your kid. You know what I mean? Because like there's not that like there's just kind of a like I have a brake first of all in my side of the car when I'm driving these kids,
Yeah.
and it's like I'm used to teaching high schoolers, so it just kind of comes a little bit more naturally, I think.
Oh, I suppose, yeah, it kind of would lend itself to it. So, yeah, I don't have a break, but luckily I live in a small town. We've gone around the
Mm.
block and stuff, got out onto the highway. So, just kind
Oh,
of the
good.
beginning stages. So,
Sure.
yeah. Um, well, I've got some questions for you. They're not really in any particular order, just kind of stuff that popped into my head. We'll see how much I remember of the book here. Um, there's one question I forgot to grab that I'll get from Twitter, but I think you saw that already. So,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
my first question here is like, when did the idea for this story pop into your head, and has it changed from like its genesis, its beginning, to where it ended up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, it kind of was a function of the world for a little bit, and the original story. And I don't know if I think I might have mentioned this before, but I'll go into a little bit more detail because you asked about the changing, which I think is neat. But so the Reachman had existed for a while before the story came to be, and I always kind of like throwing them in there. And they went through a couple different iterations. Like at one point, they were more stoic, kind of. If you've read the A Song of Ice and Fire books, kind of like the Unsullied a little bit more. Not as extreme, but they were just more regimented and stuff like that. And they're still the mercenaries of that area. But I remember standing outside with a friend of mine, the one who he's on Authors Adventures, which shout out is getting an episode on Sunday, and then he will be for the first time experiencing Andrew D. Meredith's world. But he helped me develop the world a little bit. The stuff with the Reachmen, Harful, that's all me. But the original genesis of the world was, like you said, with Genesis was with basically the people who we come to see at the beginning of book 2, which we kind of see a hint of in the prologue of book 1. But anyway, so I remember standing outside on my porch and telling him I had an idea. And I don't want to spoil what the exact idea was for, because it wasn't really about it's still about the same thing, but I had an idea for something that the world needed. And it's something that happens in book 2 that's going to be significant in other books later. But so I changed it up a couple of times. So at one point it was way more militaristic. Originally, Kale was going to be the only point of view. It was going to be a series of wars at the beginning, and the series of wars come later and are about different things. So kind of one of the things that happened as I was writing it was, so the first chapter I wrote, and I felt really good about it. And that was like one of the first times I've ever felt good about writing anything. And I ended up having to change it a few times. But the very next chapter, I thought, well, I know this character exists. And who is this guy that killed his brother? Who's Emil? And I didn't have a name for him. I actually named it after an Arsenal player, Emil Smith-Rowe, just randomly. And then so I was like, okay, well, I like that chapter too. Well, wait. Who's the sister? And I knew, because I knew the sister was going to be very important. So I didn't have a name for her either. And I sat down and I thought, like, what would be, and it just kind of grew from there, where instead of being Kale's story, and, you can really argue it's Marilee's story more than anybody's, especially when you get to book 2, and it became more of an ensemble cast. And, it just kind of took a little bit of life of its own. As I was writing it, this is longer than you probably expected, so I apologize.
No, this is great.
Yeah. I wrote it to query, and I read that you could only really query things that were under 120,000 words. So this was supposed to be a standalone. It was not supposed to be a sprawling story at all. I kind of had to change a few things towards the end of book 1 in order to have a nice resolution and make the drama continue. Because I could have had a little bit more of a lull there if it wasn't the ending of the book. And that I changed a few things, like what happens with Orden. That became significantly different. I think what happened with Kale was actually originally supposed to happen with Orden. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't read it. And then a few people who died were supposed to survive. A few people who survived were supposed to die. Eric, for instance, I wrote chapter 4 thinking he was going to die, but then I really loved the back and forth him and Emil have towards the end of that chapter. Freya was supposed to just be a platonic friend for Kale, and then she kind of got her own thing. So it's kind of been interesting, because like I have not been able to predict where this is going to go, but I did know, for anybody who's read book 2, the end of book 2 was really supposed to be the middle of book 1. It was supposed to happen much earlier. It has been planned from the very beginning. Some people are still mad about it, and that's okay. I'm good with it.
Cool. I've not read book 2 yet, and I guess probably should have forewarned people. There definitely could be spoilers in this conversation. So.
Sure.
So is this been living in your head for like years and years, or has it been like a few years?
So the original story I came up with, it was 2015, I think, was when I came up with the idea. And so this was, what's interesting too, and this is what I tell some people who want to know, the world as it exists behind my head right here. And I don't think you guys are going to see this because this is a podcast, but I have a map in my books. This is not the map that most of the people who played Dungeons and Dragons with us know. There's a lot of significant boundary differences. And I had to make sure I made a spoiler-free map to go in the back of my book, because it's very different. So like so people knew the story of what happened in the Reach, and it actually becomes significant in a later story. But we had never played in that era. We had never really talked about who these characters were. For a long time, the only character that was named was Kale, because I actually tried to write it around that time, and a few paragraphs made it in, but I just wasn't with it, like the way I feel like I've gotten progressed with my writing abilities. But yeah, it's been a long time. I actually had to take down. I was making Dungeons and Dragons assets, And one of the things that's directly related to the story I had to get rid of because I don't want, like, when I was going to release the book, because it would be way too much of a spoiler and would have spoiled the end of book 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The person that you're talking, was that Short Sleeves? I watched
Short
some of
sleeve.
the.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't
Yeah.
finished that first video yet. I haven't watched any more, but I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe that's who it was.
Yeah, me and him have been friends for about, I think, like 17 years now, and we started playing D&D together in college. Originally, he was the dungeon master, and then, like, so if you look at my map of my books or behind my head, on the one side you have that area that's not really discussed in the books, and that's what we played in back then. And at one point, I was going to have it be completely distinct and be my own thing, but I really liked some of the stuff we had come up with. It's a little bit more epic fantasy than what I tend to go with, but I like to have sort of kind of branching, and some of the stories we do eventually I think are going to be a little bit more magic heavy and sprawling than Traitors or Grave. But we'll see. I mean, I'm kind of like, I'm at a point where I know what I want to write. I just got to find the time to write it. But yeah, Short Sleeve has been like a really good person to bounce ideas off of. And you can catch him on that first episode of Authors and Adventures, where he did, I think, a great job. And he'll be on the second one, which I'm going to be interested to see how he blends with Andrew's world, because it's very different than what he's used to.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm not one for usually just turning on YouTube and watching stuff. So it's
Right.
kind of hard for me to find the time to watch it. But yeah, I don't know, probably 30, 40 minutes into it. I'll have to get through the rest because yeah, I definitely had fun listening to it, and it's something I want to see where it goes. So
Oh, cool.
I think I saw you're going to have Tori Tekken on next. I know she's in
Yep.
Minnesota also.
Oh,
So that's
really?
kind of
Okay.
cool. Yeah.
I think I knew that, but I have a bad memory. But yeah, she's going to be a player. It's me, Tori, Short Sleeve, and then Dewey from Tana. I don't know, Tana. I don't know if I've ever heard them say it out loud. Tender Sword that he wrote with Bill Adams from Willow Wraith Press, and Andrew Deemer that's going to DM for us. I'm pretty intrigued to see how it goes, because we don't have any idea what we're doing. We're just kind of showing up and doing it, you know?
That's fun, though. That's the fun
Yeah,
side of things.
for sure.
Next question. And I guess I'm not sure if you maybe kind of answered some of this in the first question there, but did you have any inspirations for this
Oh
story?
yeah. So, and Dr. John Morrow on Twitter, who reviews for Grimdark magazine and Before We Go blog, noticed it, and like he got 100% right. A lot of my initial inspiration for this was A Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones TV show, and then I kind of have soured a little bit on it over the years. Um, but that was like a lot of, I loved the aspect of the different lords and like the people betraying each other, and everybody has like these goals, but there's also these very human stories where, like, Arya's story, at least in the seasons that I watched and then the books that I read, isn't really about isn't really about becoming the queen of anything. It's about revenge. It's about trying to get do unto others as they did unto her. So that was a big one. Joe Abercrombie was a big one as well. I really, really like pretty much every single book I've read of his, except for Red Country and Sharp Ends, which they just weren't to my taste. But he's a fantastic author. And now I think kind of where I'm going with now, I think like the inspiration, and you kind of see it a little bit in Grave, is I've been really inspired a little bit. I tried to do some homages in there. So I did an Abercrombie homage about like a third of the way through the book, where there's a battle scene and it shifts from characters' perspectives, but it's all characters we've never seen before, and it goes back and forth. And then I did a Wheel of Time homage a little bit after that, where two characters go to an end. There's a nice innkeeper, but bad stuff happen at the end, which to me is a very, at least for the first 3 books that I've read, because I'm kind of slacking on my reading. That's a very Wheel of Time thing. And then my new obsession is I'm really into Bernard I think it's Cornwall, who did the Saxon stories and the Last Kingdom TV shows based off his work. But like, and I was telling my friend Bill with Willow Wraith Press, I really wish I had read these books before I started writing, because my understanding of feudalism is a lot better. And, not even just feudalism, but like how peasant armies work and how the different things work, because he's very more historical fiction. And then Anthony Ryan's The Pariah is, to me, one of the most brilliant books I've read recently, where I feel like that is something I wish I could do, is that level of detail and that level of both realism but magic at the same time, and it just blends so seamlessly. And then Vinland Saga is like my favorite thing ever, the anime and the manga. It's very similar in a lot of ways to, I mean, and it's really weird because I'm kind of going more historical fiction with it, but I've had some people tell me that Traitors is a little bit more historical fiction than fantasy, just with some fantastical elements. But I just really like these stories about like these, these really big, broad struggles, but you have just a few people that you're following throughout them.
Cool. I've not read any Joe Abercrombie yet. I've got a few of his books. I've read Wheel of Time, everything that's out there. Watched all the show.
Mm.
Watching House of the Dragon now.
Oh, nice. I heard that's good. Is that worth watching? I kind of crashed out on the Game of Thrones show.
It's fantastic. I think
Okay.
the second season is their Sunday was just the 5th episode of 8, and the
Okay.
first season was really good. I read the book earlier this summer because I wanted to know what was going to happen
Yeah.
before I saw, and it's absolutely brutal, and I love knowing. I don't know where they're going to end the season. I've got an idea what I kind of think will happen because there's plenty more they can do, but I love knowing what's coming. And
Mm-hmm.
like my wife likes House of the Dragon a lot more than Game of Thrones.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know because I was trying to sell my wife on it possibly because I really liked the first few seasons of Game of Thrones, and then it was around the time I just remember when they got ahead of the books, and I was feeling like it just got kind of silly a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
wasn't as serious with like characters were not punished as often for their mistakes.
I'm not one of the fans that hated the ending. I didn't love
Okay.
it, but I didn't hate it either. But
Yeah.
this man, House of the Dragon, it's just as brutal, and they got the budget, earlier
Mm.
versus Game of
Yeah.
Thrones,
Right.
where they didn't know if it was going to be successful and stuff. Definitely worth a watch, I would say.
Okay. Interesting.
Um, what do you think like your biggest challenge has been that you've faced in maybe not even necessarily writing this first book, but the series as a whole? Like,
Mm.
and what did you do to overcome it, and what was that feeling like when you overcame it?
I've got a couple. I think, and I think I'll speak to because I feel like I finally maybe have gotten a little bit further. I think the thing that I struggled with a lot at the beginning was the anonymity of releasing a book into the wild, and like I did a horrible job releasing it. I just got mad one day, decided I didn't want to query anymore because I queried 12 times, which is nothing. But I was just like, it's like I literally couldn't get myself to sit down and query because I just hated it so much. So I got mad. I made a cover like in 5 seconds and published it. And I actually got like a decent amount of sales, but like, my first year was like not anything spectacular. That last year was good as well, but I mean, like I started kind of getting a little bit more momentum, and it only feels like right now after releasing the second one that like not that like and that's the thing too is like it's not like you're not famous, you're not like it's not like everybody out there knows my books, but like I feel like I can consistently make progress without putting in full effort like I was having to at the beginning, where like I had to be like, oh, please read this book, or hey, maybe you like this book. I'll see sales pop up, or I'll see page reads pop up, and I didn't do anything to earn those. You know what I mean? Other than have this book out there, so I'm hoping that means that people are talking about it. And I think that the biggest thing that I tell people, especially new authors, and older authors, there's a lot of people doing this a lot longer than me, is the persistence is the key in finding that readership. I got really lucky early on, and I found Reed Logan Westgate, another indie author, and he read my book and loved it, and he just tells everybody about it. Nat Swift on Twitter, he's a fantastic champion. And then also just find your tribe. I think that's the other thing and I'll go with that with the author experience. I had trouble finding the right people early on too. Like I would make friends. And I made a few friends I still have to this day, but we were in different genres, and we just kind of fit. Like they faded off Twitter or whatever. We'll talk on occasion. But I had some like there's like without like going into too much detail, like I had a few people be very snaky. Like one guy bought my book and like he wanted it signed so bad, and I was like we'd critique partner short stories. I was like, okay, and he gave me his wrong address. I had to like send it to him twice. And then he was getting mad at everybody, and I forget what but he basically like, oh, you got what you wanted. I bought your book, and I was like, dude, what, I mean, like I spent more money on that book than he did probably, having to send it to him twice because like I didn't know about new authors. There's a thing called media mail. They will send your books for so cheap if you just ask them and tell them it's a book. I had no idea, so I sent it with like a tracking number and stuff like that. And then I think my big turnaround was I started making friends kind of loosely. But I realized I try to like, dig into the community. And I think like the thing is like read indie, if you're an indie author and you're not reading indie, you're doing it wrong. So I got Legacy of the Brightwash was a pretty early on read for me. And me and Crystal, we're pretty good friends. I mean, like she's a constant source of encouragement if you need it, like anybody. And just like one of the most, I mean, that is one of the best books I've read, indie or not, just absolutely. I was crying at one point on my commute home listening to the audiobook because I was just like so overcome. And then the other big one that I read then was Thrice by Andrew Meredith. And like that's what I tell people is like I went from being a fan of Andrew Meredith to being a friend. Like the reason that me and him talked was because I was in the same Discord as him and he's offering Deathless Beast codes. I'm like, hey, can I get one? Because I bought the Thrice audiobook because I was so interested in it. And I think that's the thing is just do what you want to do. Find good friends, and if you get discouraged, like it's cool to be discouraged sometimes, but you can't always be negative. You gotta keep moving that ball forward. And at the end of the day, like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's days I want to give up all the time, but you just got to keep going.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, Justin and I, our main focus is a traditionally published book series, but one thing we both want to do is read more indie fantasy, and that's kind of where this came from. And I mean, that's 95% of what I buy now for books. I've got, you can't really see it, but my bookshelf here is full of them. It's just all indie books, and I've got Andrew Meredith's books. But I kind of remember when I feel like we kind of got into the scene, and I run our Twitter, but I kind of noticed like, well, all these indie books, and like the first one that really caught my eye was H.C. Newell's Curse of the Fallen. I'm like, man, that book has just got such a sweet ass cover. I'm like, I got to get this book, got to read it. And I bought them from her, and she sent them, and like at her post office, somebody stole them. She got the box returned. It was empty, and it had like some weird message on it, and she was kind enough to resend them, and I got them. I think whoever stole them must have thought it was like a computer because it was kind of that size.
Oh, yeah.
I got like two of them, the first two, and but just like seeing that, I guess, indie explosion, I felt like I kind of witnessed seeing that, which was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a lot of fun.
And actually, like to talk on that, because like, I debated about the traditionally published thing, and this is for those people who traditional or not, if you want to know a difference, like, unless you're getting a sweetheart deal from a huge publisher, you should go indie because you're going to make more money. You're still doing the same things that you need to do anyway. Like I know a lot of traditionally published people are out there trying to grease the same wheels, but it's taking longer. And, if you don't sell well, they're going to drop you. So it's better to build that readership, I think, first, try to get, people to see what you're doing. But that's my recommendation. I think like, some people get really lucky early on, but I would, if I had to choose the same path, I would definitely like have just gone indie to begin with and done a decent book launch and maybe bought a cover because I found out about gig covers. And I mean, that's the thing is, the cost worries people. My covers are like $35. You know what I mean? Like I get them made by, there's a company in the Ukraine. It's the same company as Mibble Art, but it's who they have when they're like training to be on Mibble Art. And I feel like they've done a great job. It just, you don't cut corners, but at the same time, there are cheap opportunities. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think your covers are great. They look good.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And just, like you said, getting that readership. And I guess me personally, I get to interact with a lot of authors on Twitter, and I've talked with you on Twitter, and it's our first time talking face to face, as it were. But you definitely can build a relationship that way, and it's just much more personal, and it makes it more enjoyable, I think. Reading a book like that.
I agree with that a lot too, because like. The one downfall is like sometimes I want to look up something about the book and there's not like resources on it, but then I can just like be like, hey, what did this mean? You know what I mean? Like, and just ask the author, and that's kind of nice too,
Yeah.
um but it's also like, just like you said, it's cool, like it's cool hearing, like nobody feels intimidated at least I don't think they do, to approach me. So like I love hearing from people, like, if you have a indie book, I mean, like I've even talked to traditionally published authors, and sometimes they'll talk to you too. Like it's really cool how like democratized it's become. Like it's not like everybody, like, well, I mean, there's some people who were born famous, and I won't give you the time of day, but like I made a joke post uh about casting a Assassin's Apprentice, and Robin Hobb joined in. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, just like and now we're like, we follow each other. It's really crazy. You never know what's gonna happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't know till you ask. I mean,
Mm.
we got to talk to Steven Erickson, and all it took was me
Mm.
asking, and
Yeah,
I was blown away. He gave us the time of day. I mean, we talked to him for 2 hours when he finished Dead House Gates, and
I
hopefully
heard
we'll
he's
be able to talk to
super.
him again.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I heard he's super nice.
Oh, he was fantastic. He's such a
Mm.
nice guy. It was a lot of fun. Just very like humbling that this guy, he's sold millions of books, and he
Yeah,
talked to basically a couple of nobodies, just having fun reading his books. So
yeah, I get you. I get you.
yeah. Um, I really liked the names in your books,
Mm.
and one of my favorites is a god that is named Cinna. So I'm
Mm.
curious where that came from. Is there some like irony to name the name of the god, where like the mortals
Yeah.
are sinners,
Oh,
like a play on words or anything?
so I've this is gonna sound really stupid. I've gotten really lucky multiple times just making stuff up. Like I found out, like so Sina, Loma, and Guma, the goddesses. I was like, all right, so these are a tribal religion. So I was looking for something kind of easy to say that all kind of sounded similar. Like I found out Loma is, I think, Spanish for darkness, and I was like, wow, that's pretty. I just thought I made that up. You know what I mean? And then so actually, I got a Norwegian reader told me that two of my names are curse words in Norwegian, and like, so especially like one of them, I was like, that is absolutely perfect. Like I couldn't have planned that better. And I don't know how I've gotten so stupid lucky with names, but there's that. Sometimes I just kind of like for the reach, I kind of looked up some Irish names or Gaelic names and kind of did some plays on those. And then for the keep, a lot of those are misspellings of common names that I feel like a way that a rich person would try to sound fancy. Like there's kind of a joke where Emil talks about that guy named Frank or Frank, which is Frank with an H.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's just like, like what would be the most obnoxious way you could spell Frank, was like, or like Grieg is like, just add an I in there, you know what I mean? Like, but I don't know, I wish I had some smart thing about that, but like, yeah, that Cena is, I've never put that together. Um, you know what though? We're gonna edit that out. And we're gonna say I planned that, and I'm just like really brilliant or something. But that is cool though.
That's just kind of what popped into my head, so I wasn't sure. I'm like, well, it made sense in my head. So
I get you. Well, I mean, that's like a cool that you made that connection. Like, and I think too, like as like somebody who studied English in college, like sometimes I wonder, did the author make the connections that we're making? You know what I mean? And like, some people don't like literary analysis because they think they're over reading, but I love it. Like I could have discussions about that sort of stuff, all day. Like, and I think I think it was Andres Stein, one of my friends on Twitter, was talking about how much I love parallelism, and like some of that is intentional, like, but some of it's also not. But like, I try to put Emil and Eric as close together as possible because they're so similar but so different. And then, but you also have like, some like on a different thing. Kale and Eric are also a parallel because they're both warriors but just completely different. Orden and Alvin, the same kind of dude, just slightly different, and I mean, that just kind of naturally happens, and sometimes it's intentional, I think, and sometimes it's not. But from now on, I'm just gonna start claiming credit.
take it,
That's
man.
right.
Um, the the whole writing that disappears is
Mm,
like a really interesting thing. I don't know that I've ever read anything like that before, and clearly, like I've not read every book out there.
sure.
Um, but I'm curious, like, couldn't somebody have like a secret writer, and maybe that's kind of like what the guild is to maybe an extent, but to protect what's been written, like
Mm, Yeah.
unless there's problems with like validity or authenticating something, questions that way.
Mm. So a lot, I get asked this a lot in Dungeons and Dragons as well. So the Scribes Guild, and this is going to come up, and this is not a huge spoiler. It might be a spoiler for a future series, but the Scribes Guild in the College of Luthen, which is briefly mentioned in Traitors, are in a secret war to control history a little bit too. So like there is like that validity thing, but there's also like they have to keep rewriting these things. And like so somebody asked one time, it's like, well, why don't they just invent the printing press? And I thought to myself, that's a really good idea. I'm like, well, the Scribes Guild probably killed whoever tried to invent it, and then just did whatever to all the stuff for it. So like there is going to be some stuff coming up at some point in either this series or another series where it's. I will eventually explain why the writing disappears, and there is a reason for it. But like I've got a couple things that are going to kind of maybe throw a wrench in that a little bit as well. You know what I mean? And like there's going to be more. So, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with the second book is have more, not the personal aspect of writing disappearing like it is in Traitors, where it's like the letters or the names or the contract signing. It's history itself. There's like I think Dr. Morrow included the quote in his review of Grave where somebody talks about it's like it's not important that I get the duchy or whatever. It's important that I've always controlled it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so basically after a war, like the wars we see in the books, it's like who's going to fight you on that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Interesting. Is there, have you left any clues like in this first book that a perceptive reader might be able to find and figure it out, or is there not enough information there?
It's been a while since I read Traitors. Here's the thing too, and this is kind of one of the things that I think, like because people always say it's such a low magic world. There is magic in the world, but if you think about who our narrators are, we don't see it, so we can only really perceive what they perceive, and they're so used to it that I don't think that they really think about it all that much. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, oh, of course the writing disappears. I do have a plan to drop some major hints in if I ever finish it. The Unclaimed Girl is a book I'm going to write at some point, and I've started it already, which is kind of a retelling of a story I wrote a long, long time ago, and it's going to drop a pretty major hint. I won't even tell you because like I've mentioned it on different podcasts at one point, but like there's going to be a thing where for some people it's very physically hard to write. Like it pains them to write, and I'll put that out there. Yeah, and then there's gonna be a few other things. Like I think I don't want to spoil that one. So like my big epic series that I want to do like many books on. I mean, like there's gonna be a really big plot twist. I don't want to throw that out there yet, but I'm gonna drop a few here and there. But that's gonna be like my major thing at some point is to finally reveal why that is once people actually care about it. You know what I mean? Like right now, like I've had people have read it, but like I want people to be like, what is going on, And then maybe if I don't get a chance to do it, I'll like leave it with somebody and they can open it in an envelope one day.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
I know I kind of, when I was going through it, that was kind of one of those things that just like bugged me. I'm like, why is this happening? Like, what is it about?
Yeah.
And for some reason I was kind of thinking like, is this tied to like the victory and the defeat beer? Because that just seems like weird to have.
That's just their weird, like Reachmen are weird, man. Like that's just their cultural thing, but that would be interesting too. All right. I don't know. I don't want to spoil it. I think I've told a few people it, but like there is a real reason, and it makes a lot of sense. And then like all right, here's another one, and this is gonna be in a short story. All right, some interesting things. I'll just throw these out there. I've been asked all these questions either by readers or Dungeons and Dragons people. So here's another one. If I were to carve into a stone the words, what would happen if I died? And the words would disappear, but also the dust would still be there. So what I'm thinking is that the rock would lose mass. Okay. I'm not a science guy, I'm an English teacher, but that's what makes sense to me. So somebody asked, okay, let's say I painted a painting. It's no words are on it except for my signature. What happens when I die? Your signature disappears. And these are starting to be a little bit hints. All right. This one was going to be in the short story, and I haven't gotten into it yet. Somebody asked if I tattoo words on myself, and that comes up a little bit because there's people with word tattoos in book 2. What happens when the person who does it dies? And we decided, being the people who've been playing for a long time, that your body would actually break down the ink and you would discharge it instead of it just disappearing. So that might be somewhat of a hint, but only the writing disappears, and it has to be writing. So sigils and runes do not disappear. There's a culture that instead of, and they're not going to show up for a while, but instead of writing things, they do. I base this off a real world culture, but they write, like, they make knots and beads together. That doesn't disappear. So it's the words. It's about the words, not the writing necessarily, but it is about creating words. Oh, printing press. If this is the hard one. So I had to think about this one for a long time. If this is boring, please let me know and shut me up.
No, I'm loving this.
Okay. So with a printing press, and I actually had this in D&D, and I had to change it and retcon it. If somebody were able to invent it and the Scribes Guild did see it, if you died, what would happen? So I decided, pressing it down and putting a letter on the paper, the letter on the paper would not disappear. Carving the letter into the rubber stamp or whatever, the rubber stamp letter would disappear.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So you'd have to constantly be making the little blocks or whatever.
Yep. And that's kind of, I think it's going to be a bigger deal in the next series. And some people, I think, were disappointed with Traitors, and even Grave, to an extent, that the writing's not as big of a deal, or that I don't reveal. But, like, I mean, the thing is, to me, it's just a function of the world. Eventually we'll get to it, and the next one is the big series is going to start off, I think, with, I'm really excited about it. I gotta finish Traitors first, because there's world level spoilers, or the Crown Tide series, because there's going to be big spoilers if you read them out of order. But it's going to start with scribes in the country of Soldos, which is mentioned a little bit more in Grave. And there's going to be a professor who came from land overseas with some important stuff that he found, and, like, nobody knows exactly what it is, but he wrote his observations down. But he's dying, so they take the book and they split it up into 10 parts. And 10 apprentice scribes start writing the stuff that he discovered. And then, like a week or so later, after he dies, somebody starts tracking down and killing the scribes, because they don't know which part of the book they wrote down. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be neat. But, like, I want to finish this first and then go to that at some point.
So the writing that disappearing, that's a worldwide thing. That's not just specific to a region.
Yep, the whole world, like, and then there's a lot of stuff that, like, I really want to get to, like, and you can't see it on my map because of the way it's kind of down there. There's the Nuerja, and they actually believe writing is a sin, because if man was meant to write, it would stay there. And they also are kind of similar to the Reachmen in that they don't respect or worship the gods. Unlike the Reachmen, who are just kind of jerks about it, they're more like secular humanists, and believe that man is the ultimate authority, so that they should be able to do this with only what man was provided, which is their memories. So they have kind of Homeric poems, and that'll be, I think, somewhat in that series as well, maybe.
Interesting. Very cool. So I guess this is more of a comment, but just, writing that disappears is a literal, watch your language.
Yeah, for sure.
I found it interesting that Orden's children, they don't address him as dad or father. I don't know if that's so much a question versus a statement, but I don't know if that really gives you anything to go off of as far as an answer or anything.
Yeah, no, that definitely does. So one of the things I tried to go for, especially in the early chapters, was their relationship with him. And the fact that, like, and Marilee kind of observes it in her second chapter, I forget what number that is, where she's referencing the fact that Kale's so angry all the time, that Warson was, never, like, got to have, like, a proper relationship. Kieran is just completely awful. And then she's kind of naive. And it's like that he, being their father, damaged them all in different ways. And he, so I also, that was when I was still writing the first draft of the book, where he was going to have Kale's fate. Kale was going to have a completely different thing that he went off and did. But, like, the thing that I'm going to try to bring back to is, and this is something I think ZB Steel who was one of the guys who asked a question on Twitter, said when he was one of my betas for Grave, was he's like, it's amazing that Orden isn't in book 2, but his shadow is so large, people are still thinking about what he would do and what he has done and like why it's like that. So he's a very complicated character. Some people really like him, which I was surprised by. But he's very much ends justify the means, and his dream is the most important thing. The reach being the reach on its own without the and not even that, but like even the power that he and his family will get from that is of paramount importance. But like, it's even like in chapter 2 where Marilee mentions that like her first reference of Orden is like, at least he doesn't seem like he's lying too much this time. Like he's just a bad person. You know what I mean?
He definitely kind of feels like a Tywin Lannister character.
That was actually who I envisioned every time I wrote him at the beginning. Yeah, that was
really?
that was a big inspiration. And the other thing too I try to do is like everybody has well, more in book 1, but everybody has an amount of reach slang and accent that they have, and Orden has none, if I recall. Because
I did not pick up on
yeah,
that. But now
yeah.
that I think about it, yeah, I recognize that. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt you.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Like Kieran and Marilee, I think have the most. And Marilee also, my original draft was like foul mouthed. And then Kale is a little bit more, a little bit, but like everybody has a different amount that they use. Kieran is, I think, I think he ends up with by far the most. But yeah, Orden doesn't ever say Y with an apostrophe or YER. And he doesn't do any of their traditions or anything like that.
Gotcha. So the play, the symbol of decay.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that, to me it felt like a parallel to Romeo and Juliet
Yes.
to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. Okay, and with Eric and Freya, it kind of also seemed that way. Also, I was curious if
Mm-hmm.
that was intentional.
Absolutely. So that was a parallel to Romeo and Juliet. And then I'm not even a big Romeo and Juliet guy, so it's weird but I like a few things about it. And one is that like that inevitable, like, just the tragedy, and like they kind of like I feel like they are more fatalistic in book 1, even parts of book 2 as well. They have this fatalistic idea about their relationship. The other allusion to Romeo and Juliet was when Mathis and Kale are fighting in the streets, and those guys come down and just start beating down the swords, like the police basically do. But I love like Shakespearean, even though I don't love Shakespeare stuff most of the time. Like I like a few of the plays, but I love the those like really cool, big, iconic moments. And but yeah, like the other thing too is I feel like like especially with what we'll see in book 2 with Freya is like Freya is very like even not just like how Kale and them they're all damaged by the reach as well as their parents in some way, because the reach is impoverished, and like they don't have a whole lot of hope there. There's not a lot of economic opportunity and stuff like that. But yeah, I enjoyed that chapter a lot. In fact, like their chapters sometimes end up being my favorite, even though they're not always the strictest adherence to the narrative plot. As at least yet, it will be more significant later. But I feel like and a lot of times, like I get a lot of comments that they are their like people's favorite characters too, which I think is kind of also Romeo and Juliet-ish, because like how many people talk about Mercutio or Tybalt or whoever, they always talk about Romeo and Juliet.
I guess I don't really remember any of the other characters. I think
Right.
we had in like my freshman high school English class,
Yep.
an assignment was we had to write marriage vows for it. And I
Mm.
forgot about the assignment and did it the night before, and mine ended up winning. And so then when my teacher was reading them off, I'm like, holy shit, she picked mine. Like, what the hell? So
Oh, dude.
yeah, it's about all that I remember.
I can always tell people who had bad English teachers because they're like, oh, Romeo and Juliet, that's my favorite love story. Okay. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. This question I jotted down, and I think it was I kind of answered just from reading the book, but there was the witch asking like the marriage vows, and that was one
Yes.
of the gods, right?
No, actually. So, sort of. So and like I kept it ambiguous on purpose, but every time there's a witch in Traitors, it's always Janna. Like she's the one from the prologue, and she like every single time it's her, and then eventually she passes it on to Deidre, I think, or Deidre. But yeah, so like she's that is Janna after consuming the Draelix, to like do her like prophecy thing. Um, but yeah, so it's not actually the goddess. Yeah,
Okay.
she there's a reason it can't be, though that is a good reading, I think. But that will not be revealed till the end of book. Like the what's going on with the goddess will be revealed at the end of book 3. Though she's kind of my Thanos in a lot of ways, where I think she's going to show up in the background a lot until the big series.
Gotcha. Um, Coming back to the victory and the defeat beers, so you said it's just kind of like a culture type thing,
Yeah.
but they are distinctly different things. Like they taste different.
Mm-hmm.
Do they play like a role in things? Because I had the sense, like I was wondering, like it almost predetermined how the battles were going to go, and it really
Mm.
made me think, like, okay, so is this part of like Ordan's strategy? Like, this guy's going to have the defeat beer on tap because we're going to go out and fight this battle, and it's not going to go good. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, like I think they have they have both ready because they drink a lot. But yeah, it's just kind of like I mean, the Reach, they don't have any religion, so it's a lot of everything that they do is superstition. You know what I mean? Like the talking bad about the dead, the victory and the defeat beer. So the victory beer is kind of a little bit lighter and crisper. The defeat beer, so like I always picture it as being like a pale ale or a like kind of hoppy wheat beer, and then the defeat beer being like a Russian imperial stout or a barley wine or something of that nature, because you want to just forget what you're doing. But that is my ultimate dream collaboration, is to have like a victory and defeat beer brewed by a brewery, and then like I just feel like that'd be the ultimate collaboration one day. But yeah, that's actually not an Orden thing either. Like I think that is the one tradition he maybe likes because he gets to flex on people a little bit. Because like that's also the thing is like you might have noticed in negotiations sometimes they'll just like randomly serve somebody defeat beer, and it's kind of like ha ha ha, I got you, and that comes up in the second book as well. But I mean, Reachmen are just very spiteful. Like they're like one of my D&D players is like, when I was writing the book, he's like, why would you choose the story to be the first book you wrote? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, the Reachmen are awful. No one is going to like them. And I was like, but I like them. And I think people like him more than this guy gave him credit for. But yeah, I guess it was a weird place to start. I don't know.
I do. You mentioned. I remember you saying something on Twitter, and my
Mm.
sister, for now, lives in Fayetteville. They're going to be moving.
Oh
I
yeah,
think you're kind of close to there, right?
yeah. About like
Um,
an hour and a half, I think 2 hours.
okay, gotcha. And I know she had when my sister got married, they had some friends that own a brewery, and they get to like brew their
Mm.
own beer and stuff. So
That's so cool.
yeah. Um, so my last question that I've got is where do I go next? Do I read the novella next, or do I read that
Mm-mm.
after A Grave for Us All? Like I guess, or could I do either? But as the author, what would be your intended order?
So I tried to do it so that it could be done either way, and for a long time, basically whichever you read first was the one that people said you should read first for Traitors or Revenge. Um, I think the consensus now is a little bit more firmly read Traitors first and then read Revenge. So, and I need to do this update still. There's a little bit more grammatical errors with Revenge, but it's not like horrible. But I do need to do an update too because I haven't updated it since it was published. Um, I would say Traitors, Revenge, Grave is a good order because Revenge gives you a couple people who show up in Grave. I'm curious. I don't know if anybody has read it in Traitors, Grave, Revenge yet, but that I think might even be sadder. I know that like all right, so the two revelations I give you is the people who read Revenge first like it because if they feel like it makes the things that happen in Traitors way worse. But I've also had like somebody read Revenge, get to the part where I mean it's not really a spoiler because it's chapter 1 where Darius dies and just close the book in Traitors because they're so upset. Um, but on the other end, like it's kind of interesting because like, and this is something I kind of worked on. This is kind of dumb too. I don't know if anybody cares about this, but like if you look at the covers, they get slightly darker. So like Traitors is really blue, Grave is a little bit more blackish grayish, but still blue, and Revenge is kind of lighter blue, and it kind of goes from lighter to darker. But Revenge, like we see like Merrily and Darius being happy, and it's just, I mean, that's kind of upsetting. Kale even isn't even that much upset yet. Like it's the beginning of the war. Kale still feels like he can be, maybe, I don't know about being a hero, but like he's gonna, he's doing it. Lorson is a main POV. And that was one of the reasons I wrote it, is because I was like, I really want to have more Darius and Lorson, because that was another two chapters I really enjoyed writing, was their two chapters in Traitors.
Gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was Lorkin or Lorson, so I'm glad you cleared that up.
My wife tells me how to pronounce the names of my characters. I never know. Like I always call, all right, Orden. I used to call him Ordan, and my wife was like, "That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." And then there's a character in Revenge and Grave called Horache, and I called him, what do I call him? Harach, and she's like, "That's Harash," and I'm like, "That's a good point, actually." So like, my wife tells me how to pronounce things. Again, I've gotten really dumb lucky with names. I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of write things down and hope for the best.
It's working out.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
So I will read Revenge next. Then it sounds like.
Okay, yeah. Let me know what you think about the read order then too. I've never had anybody. I think I've had like one or two people say they wish they had read Traitors first if they read Revenge first, but I mean it's kind of a toss up.
Because I mean, I guess chronologically, as you published them, it was Traitors, Revenge, and then A Grave.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Right, and I try to make it so it be even. But the thing is, and this is what I think some people don't like. So it is a novella. But it has less of a centralized plot than Traitors does, because it is a prequel. It is not I mean, it's definitely not meant to be a standalone. But whether it's 0.5 or 1.5, I think is kind of open to interpretation. If you want to read it publication order, it's Traitors Revenge Grave. If you want to read it chronologically from the world perspective, it'd be Revenge Traitors Grave.
Gotcha. Again, usually I try to go publication, so
yeah,
I'll go with that. Questions I got from elsewhere, so I guess we'll do this one first. ZB Steel, and I guess I maybe don't really understand the context to it, but he'd like to hear your concern about the concern-based interaction you've had, how you fended them off, especially if you've kept a good relationship after. So I did kind of skim that interview that he posted as well, but I guess I don't know if that means anything to you, or if you can decipher any of that.
No, yeah. So it's kind of weird, but like I've had some people just be very weird about like the fact that I was in a punk band when I was younger, and the fact that like, I mean, Traitors, I would not call it grimdark necessarily. It is a darker book, and Grave even more so. But like I am a religious person. I am a Christian, and I think like one of the things that some people think is that if it's like, and I saw somebody say something about this. It's like, there's a difference between being a Christian in a band and being a Christian band. There's a difference between being a Christian author and an author who's a Christian. And like, so like, I'm not trying to, like, if you read my book, it's pretty clear that I'm not trying to evangelize to anybody in this book. But I think that like, there are lessons, a lot of what I wrote about Cena and her church is very much like kind of an indictment of like what I not necessarily grew up with, because I had some good churches too, but like the very forced, fake, ritualistic, it's not really about belief, it's about just what we do type thing. And so like specifically the one that the one who got most concerned about me was my grandma, who recently passed. But I remember my band was going to go on tour, and my dad had found like a dead cat or dead squirrel in his yard. And I forget exactly like the situation, but she called me up and she's like, "Did you and your friend?" And me and my grandma have a great relationship. She loves me. Like, she's like, "Hey, Michael, I want to know if was that you and your friends? You can tell me if it was." And I was like, "We're," and actually we were at one point a Christian band. And I was like, we're not Satanists. None of my friends are Satanists." And I did have, I did and do have atheist friends, and I think that's also why, like, I don't feel very culturally Christian most of the time, even though I grew up in the church and stuff like that. It's a very complicated world when it comes to walking that line. But I did like so my grandma also was concerned about like the dark. She liked Traitors a lot. She made everybody read it, but she was concerned about Loma and the Dark Goddess and stuff like that. And I've had just a few people like have said things about either being in a band where they're screaming or that, where it's like, aren't you worried? Or like, what do you think God thinks of that? I don't think he is concerned with it. I think, I try to do my best. I have, a genuine and sincere faith. I try to treat people well, And I think like, that's the thing is I think that is kind of like that Cena church thing is like they're like how many of the people from Cena's religion try to help the Reachmen? You know what I mean? The answer is none. It's and I mean how many the church history like I went to a Christian school for high school and stuff. Like church history is terrible. You know what I mean? And then I think that's something I'm going to try to have Eric struggle with in book 3. I was actually really inspired by Andrew Meredith's books because his books he's also a Christian, but his books are a little bit more faith, like about the nature of faith, not necessarily Christianity, but just like the interacting with deities and like belief and the struggle of why do the gods use bad people to do good things sometimes too. And I think that's what Eric's question is going to be. And spoilers, Eric survives to the end of book 2, but Eric's question is going to be, he still believes in Cena, but after everything he's seen, how can he still believe in it? And I think like, I don't know, sometimes people like try to leap to conclusions about things that you include in books. I'm very much a art is art kind of person. At one point, Traitors was a little bit more grimdark, when I was writing it, and I, had a little bit more coarse language, and it was a little bit more violent. And I mean, Grave ended up going a little bit further with that, but it came to, I was like, well, I'm a man of faith. I'm a dad. I'm a teacher. Do I really want this to be the message I'm sending out into the world? Because it was much bleaker. In chapter 2, where Emil confronts the stable boy, I was thinking about having him just like straight up kill him, and just because Emil was supposed to be coded as somebody that could be thrown off the handle at any point. And it's just like that's not really a good thing. And that's why Eric was introduced, because I had some of this stuff kind of built up. Like there was a Finlex family and there was a Temin family, and they had a reputation. These members of the family, Polly or Polly, he existed as somebody who did something at some point that may not have happened in Traitors, but eventually he actually ended up being a central plot point in book 2. And then Eric, the Temin family, was somebody referenced as being close to the Finluxes, but Eric didn't exist. And I was just like, I need a counterpoint to this, because I want there to be a moral lesson of, even though most of the rich people are really bad, Eric is trying to be good. He wants people to do well. He wants, like, if he ended up taking over his family, he wants his vassals and the farmers to do well under his rule. But like, how many, I don't know. And I guess that's a kind of complicated thing. But some of the stuff I explore, I try to explore is like, what is our like responsibility to each other, and how do we navigate these really complex power dynamics, like Freya and Eric. Obviously they don't belong together. You know what I mean? Like, and never in a million years should that have happened. And honestly, that was not planned at all. I just thought, I was like, who is the funniest person I could sit Freya next to at this engagement dinner? And then I was like, yeah, let's put Eric Tim in there. And then I'm like, ha ha ha, they're talking. I'm like, wait a second, what are you guys doing? And it just, I don't know. It's weird.
So these characters, I mean, they really they live in your head then, and
Oh yeah,
that's just kind of how it goes.
I had no
I don't know how to
idea.
word that, I guess, but
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes I know, and like there's some plot points I try to hit, but like I had no idea that Emil was gonna jump out of the carriage in chapter 4, and it was just like all of a sudden, I'm like, what's gonna happen next? Oh wow, yeah, there you go. No idea.
Speaking of characters, I guess probably one of my favorites. I have no idea if I'm going to say this right or not. I forgot to write this down. Is it Zora of Gold?
Yeah, Zora of Gold.
And then her father,
Zopa.
Zoba.
Yeah.
I really hope I get to see more of that. And I know, like, the
Mm.
end of the book, it seems like there's going to be I guess maybe like a war march or something. But man, I think that was the death in the book that hurt me the most. And I was like, I was really like on the fence. I'm like, oh man, are they going to kill the kid too? And I did not know. And oh man, I was just sweating it out, and then finally found out it was okay. And then, man, how cool! Like Zopa, the last Chimera. What a freaking cool nickname! And then you get to kind of see. It seems like he can just rewind like history and just see like anything anywhere through. Like, is this just anybody's eyes, or is it just like one of his people's?
So it's mostly his peoples, and but it's also like there's a couple constraints with him. I kept it kind of soft magic because I don't really like hard magic, but it's like it. So for instance, he could see the killers, but like he couldn't use the killers to go see who hired them because like there's not enough like closeness, or like if he could do that, it would take so much power to probably kill him. And that's the other thing too, is like I wanted to include that to show that there is magic in the world. But at this time frame, he's probably the most powerful, like one of the most powerful people on the planet. Or like, you know, if he's not, he's like really close to it. But yeah, he's got a lot of interesting powers, and like he is going to show up in Grave and use them to great effect. He can also, so a couple things he can do. So like one, you know, the rewind and see like, you know, through his like the blood relation of his people. He can create illusions that people will see. He can control people. It helps if they're willing, but you know, he can do, I mean, but there's also constraints to it, which we'll see in Grave. And then there is a Zora flashback chapter that happens. It's not directly related to the narrative. It's not like we're going to get some huge revelation, but it explains, you know, this is something too, like I try to do a lot of with this is like, I wanted to make people forget why these people are bad. I don't think anybody ever forgets that Zopa's bad, but like, you know, like, I mean, Zora is pretty clearly not on his side, does not like him, does not want anything to do with him. You know what I mean? And there's a
Yeah.
reason for that. He's bad news.
Definitely one of my most anticipated plot lines in the story is
Oh,
seeing where that goes.
it's fun.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I got a number of questions from Jan, who would most likely be your Norwegian reader that you were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Jan he started out as a patron. He's become a good personal friend. You know, I love talking to Jan, and he's great to have around. Always got fun questions and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not sure how many questions here from him, but his first, why do you hate all your characters?
So like, all right, that's a good question. So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted there to be a realistic world and realistic consequences, and I wanted characters to act in a way that made sense for them. So like one of the things that really drove me crazy towards the end of both the series and the book series for Game of Thrones / The Song of Ice and Fire is I feel like in the TV show people stopped getting punished for bad decisions. There's a time where Braun gets an antidote after, like, immediately after getting poisoned. And it was just like a throwaway, and it's like this is not what the show was about. I think it happens in both. I don't know if I saw this on the show or not, but Tyrion falls into that river where he gets like everybody gets like the scales and he can't swim or whatever, but he survives.
Grayscale, yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was like, you know, what plot armor does Tyrion have? So I've been really trying to make it so that nobody actually has plot armor. There are a few people that like I've had personal threats about doing anything to Freya or Eric, including from my wife. So like I don't know. I might honor that. I might not. I'm not sure. But she just glared at me from across the room. I have their plot line already figured out. But like it's not even like a hate thing. It's more like a, you know, like we're all just doing the best we can, and sometimes it's not good enough. You know what I mean? I think that's like kind of one of the messages too, is like, you know, like there's always somebody better. You know what I mean? There's always somebody that knows something you don't, or that can do what you do but better, or maybe is just like, you know, it's not like but the thing is, you still have to try, and that's what I think is the thing about that makes this not grimdark, is like they're still trying to do better. It's not working out, but they're really trying.
I really like that realism, and I think that's why Zora's death hit probably the hardest for me, because I can with what you're saying, I can definitely see that. Jan's next question, he says, "Do you need more Norwegian swear words for names?"
I do, actually. That would be fantastic. I did not realize, like, I did not put two and two together. I'm really bad at that, like, as well. But yeah, I would love to have some more Norwegian swear words for names. Like, lay them on me. I'm gonna get banned.
I'm sure he'll hit you up and get you some.
All right.
He's also wondering, how many books do you have planned?
So for Crown and Tide, there's going to be the three main books, The Revenge of Thousands, and then I think at some point I want to do a novella called The Revenge of Two. That's an epilogue. I don't know if I want to spoil who the two are, but I think it will be really, really neat. And I want to make it kind of, and I've been experimenting with the style a little bit, and I haven't quite got my what I want with it, but it's gonna be more of like a pulpy spaghetti Western samurai style Kill Bill story, more a little bit action packed than Crown and Tide. And then so I've got that Unclaimed Girl, that's gonna be standalone. I've got another kind of like Witcher esque meets like more action packed, a little bit humory stuff in it. Called Hoofprint. It's about a guy who is from Dormar, which is a location that's discussed in Grave a little bit more, and he is what they call a deacon, which is like quasi religious warrior. They call him Hoof Thrice Failed because he's got a hoof print on his face from where he got kicked, and then he's also failed 3 times. There's one says a deacon, one says a monk, and then nobody knows what the third thing is. And that's going to be more like a series of kind of episodic things where it's not going to necessarily, it's going to be kind of like The Witcher, where it's at least like the stories I read in, it's the one that everybody says to read first, but I forget which one it is, but it's the one where there's a bunch of short stories, kind of like that. Yeah, it's
Never read
The Last Wish. The Last Wish. It's pretty good. I've heard the main series isn't as good as that, but that was the one that I thought was cool. And I've started that. I've got like 10,000 words, but I just haven't had time for it. And then that could go on forever. I have one that the main big series that I'm going to write, I feel like it's going to be at least 9 books.
Wow.
It's going to be called A Constellation of Lies. I have the names and the basic plot for the first 3. I just can't write it until Crown and Tide's done. But the first 3 is Under a Brutal Sun, these hands that are scarred, or these hands that toil, and then Until Scars Burn Away are going to be the first 3. I have that kind of planned. I also want to do like a series of novelettes that you can read in any order about the Judges of Wind, which is that religious order that Paulier Finlix is part of. And you're going to see the judges in the Grave, but it's basically when the religion started, they got sent off in like the 8 cardinal directions. Is there 8 cardinal directions? Yeah, there's 8 cardinal directions. And
Sure.
yeah, why
I
not?
wasn't
Why
thinking
not?
too hard on it.
Yeah. And then but like basically it's going to be like one where you can read it in any order, where maybe like all of them have the same beginning and then progressively get different and maybe even have the same end. But I mean, like, it's all about finding time, man. I got 2 jobs, I got 2 kids. It's crazy. Like I can't find the time to write. And then I found out about Crusader Kings 3, and that's really kind of ruined my life a little bit.
That's a game.
Yeah, it's really good. It's like you look it up. It'll suck your life away, but it's great.
Oh, well, maybe I'll stay away then.
Yeah, you probably want to.
Do you like Vikings?
Yes, I actually didn't like really care that much about them when I started writing, and I've gotten that the Reachmen are Irish, that they're Scottish, that they're Welsh, and that they're Vikings, and they're kind of a mixture of all of those. But I really got into Vikings this year when I got into or last year when I got into Vinland Saga, and then The Last Kingdom is about the Danish trying to where it's really about like Alfred the Great forming England, but there's all the Danish invasions and stuff like that. And my wife jokes with me because that's like I've definitely got ADHD and maybe like a touch of autism possibly, but like it's my special that's like all I'm like. That's why Crusader Kings 3 is like my thing, is because like that's all about like you can play as the Vikings, you can play as like Wessex, you can play as like anybody on the map basically from either 867 or 1066. So it's kind of very similar to like what I wrote in Traitors, where like everybody's scheming against each other, or you can just directly take over them, and it's a lot of fun.
Interesting. Were there any specific historical events that inspired you, or are you just a general history fan?
General, I've had some people say they thought like that a lot of it was similar to like, and I actually, so a lot of people are like, oh, so you were inspired by The Last Kingdom. I'm like, what is that? And they're like, oh, the Saxon stories. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And like, I watched the first season of The Last Kingdom. Like, I stole from this, and I'd never seen it before. But like, I mean, like, so I was it's just kind of like a mishmash of things. There's no real direct analog that I know of. But like, I just kind of took things I knew from history and threw them together a little bit out of my own flair.
Cool. How much of the world will be explored? Jan says there's several lands, peoples that are only hinted at. So is that maybe where, like in your future books, that'll come into play more?
Sure. So we're gonna find out in book 3 where the people who invaded at the beginning of Traitors are from, like the people that the Trustensons are descended from. We're gonna find out more about that. But yeah, I would really want the big series to be worldwide. I don't know if I can pull that off. I definitely can't right now, just because I don't have I don't think I have my abilities are there yet. But that's actually one of the reasons I started with Crown and Tide, is because I was like, this. Unfortunately, I was like, oh, this is going to be a simple story to tell. That wasn't the case, but I figured it was a good starting point, because it was just a very hyper local story about like just like a very small part of the map.
Cool. Will gods play a larger role in forthcoming books?
Yes. So, not necessarily. So I'm trying to keep Crown and Tide kind of grounded in reality more than anything. But it's going to be a bigger thing in that next series, and then there's going to be some hints about that. So, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's all right. So Jaina lives for 200 something years, I think. She's not the only one. And that it's not really been hinted at yet, but there is at least one character that's been introduced in stuff I've written so far, that will show up way in the future, and there's a reason for them there. There's a reason for the things that they say. So there's going to be a little bit more of that. And then we're also going to find out more about Soldas and their gods. And then, I kind of want to get to like talk more about like Sorheim and a few other places. But when we get to where the Trustensons are from, there's going to be some really maybe major revelations at some point with that. I don't know if it'll end up in Crown and Tide 3, or it'll be have to be in a different series.
Gotcha. All right. Just kind of a couple general questions here. Your favorite fantasy series?
Of all time, I'm gonna go with. I really liked Age of Madness, the second trilogy set in the First Law world by Joe Abercrombie. I feel like that, like it showed off his skills really, really well. There's a lot of things I did not predict. It was really great. Currently, I'm on The Martyr by Anthony Ryan, and I think it's the Covenant of Steel or the Brotherhood of Steel. It's really, really good. I'm like enjoying every moment I have with that.
Cool. What was your worst wedding experience?
Mm.
I'm thinking maybe that's he's thinking of your book for that question there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of that one. Worst wedding experience. I'm trying to think if anything bad has happened to me at a wedding. No, I can't think. I mean, like, I guess okay. Well, all right. The one thing that I feel like is like not really even the worst, but just kind of weird, was at my wedding, which my family's all Italian, and then my wife's family's all Southern. All the Italians were dancing, all the Southerners were just watching us, and it was very strange. And that was, I don't know, dude. Like, I'm used to everybody dancing for a while. It was, just, I don't know, but it was fine. I mean, I've never, I don't go to a ton of weddings, and when I do, I'm usually like kind of in the background. Like, I don't really, I don't know.
Yeah, I get you. I'm not one for dancing too much either. So, Jan's got one more question, then I've got one small question after that.
Okay.
But Jan is wondering who the Father of the Year is in Traitors.
So this is something that I get. Nobody's directly asked me, but I've been very clear on it. My dad and I have a great relationship, but like all the dads in Traitors are like really, really bad. Let me think. I'm gonna go with Finbar as a quasi dad for Kale is probably about the best, and then I think just the fact that Kale, like spoilers, Kale tries to step up for Zira, I think is like really, really amazing, because like I think like I was like, what is he gonna do in this situation? And in my head, Kale was just like, of course I'm gonna take the kid. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
But that's an interesting one too, is because like I kind of, even in the second book, we have a slightly better dad. Eric's dad shows up, but he's still pretty bad. Like, I got to do better. I got to have some good dads that people can like be like, oh, that's a great dad right there.
Cool. How is progress on book 3 for you?
Terrible. I got 2 chapters mostly written. So I like with Grave. So I'm kind of hoping it's kind of the same arc as Grave took, where I wrote a bunch of Grave here and there, and then I deleted all of it and started over again, and I'm glad I did. This though, I feel good about. I have Kale's first chapter basically done, I think, and it picks up right at the end of Grave, and then gives us a few really, I think, neat moments that also tie back together to Revenge. I got most of Marilee's first chapter. I do think that hers needs a little bit more work than his does. And then the problem I'm having then is it's like, so Grave, and most people liked how I did Grave, where even though it becomes a little bit sprawling with a lot of characters, the central narrative is pretty tight. I got to try to make sure that I keep the narrative tight, and I'm not sure who chapter 3 needs to be yet. And I mean, to be fair, like with Grave, I like the beginning of the book got rearranged a bunch. Like, Kale at one point didn't show up till chapter 6, and then I went back and wrote something for him at the beginning, and then I wrote some more Freya stuff at some point, because at one point Freya only showed up again. Oh, you don't even know about this. I can't be talking about this, but so she showed up way too late. Let's put it that way. Like, she had her own chapter and then showed up way later. But it's a process. I've got an outline that I mostly like. I've got the resolution for almost everybody. I changed my mind on a few things, but I do know how all the main cast end up. It's just gonna be a lot of work to tie it all together in a package that I feel like is appropriately satisfying. You know what I mean?
I mean, I've never written anything, so not really, but I
Oh,
think I
fair,
could
yeah,
understand.
sure.
So, but yeah, that was all I had question wise. I don't know if you have any closing remarks, anything else you'd like to end with here.
No, check out on Will Wraith Press's YouTube. We've got some stuff coming up. We've got Authors and Adventures with Andrew D. Meredith on Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Dewey and Bill Adams have started their series, A Smudgeon of Curmudgeon, where they interview people and talk about things that are going on with Will Wraith Press. Go out, read some good books. Doesn't have to be mine. Doesn't have to be indie even. Just read, talk about it, expand your mind.
Pretty solid advice there. Well, I want to thank you for giving me, well over an hour of your time here. It means a lot. I
Oh
appreciate
yeah,
it.
of
I've had a
course.
lot of fun, and the time for me definitely flew by. It didn't feel like it's
Oh
been this
sure.
long. So
I enjoyed it too. Thanks for having me on.
absolutely. Well, that is all I've got for you, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening here.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
And